Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Pediatric Grand Rounds. Very nice to see everybody this morning. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our two illustrious speakers this morning, Dr. Vinay, Vaidya and Mr. David Higginson. They're going to present on the topic of healthcare information technology, the past, present, and future. I know a topic that is near and dear to all of our hearts. I'm excited to hear their presentation this morning. They've got a full agenda, so we're going to get started right on time. Let me introduce Dr. Vaidya first. Dr. Vaidya is a native of Mumbai, India. He is the Vice President and Chief Medical Informatics Officer at Phoenix Children's Hospital for the last 8 years. He's board certified in general pediatrics, and his background is mostly in pediatric critical care. He has more than 20 years of clinical experience in that area. During the last 15 years, Dr. Vaidya has focused on the development, implementation, and dissemination of innovative clinical information technology solutions aimed at improving safety, quality, and efficiency of medical care at local and national levels. He is a frequently invited speaker, both regionally and nationally and internationally, at healthcare information conferences. Mr. Higginson is our Executive Vice President and Chief Administrative Officer here at Phoenix Children's. He is a native of Manchester, England. He received his undergrad in Liverpool in accounting and finance. He joined Phoenix Children's Hospital in 2011 as Chief Information Officer. As CIO, he oversaw all aspects of information and technology, strategy, execution, and design of systems, implementation, and growth and maintenance of the technology infrastructure. As Chief Administrative Officer, he basically does whatever Bob wants him to do. So it's my pleasure to introduce this morning.
Thank you, guys. When I was researching today what we could talk about, I did come across a slide that I think is the earliest picture of two IT guys talking to Grand Rounds folks. And I knew that it had to be right because if you look at the top, the two guys doing the deed there look a whole lot like Dr. Munzer and Dr. Ostley. And then that lady in the corner saying, I told them they should have implemented Epic. So we knew we had the right slide here. But moving on from that, what I really want to talk to you today...
David, did you get the slides mixed up?
No, it's diarrhea.
It's IT, not IT, ID.
No, okay. Well,
so when you do your evaluations, you can ignore
so let me just go with this. So I want to talk about diarrhea because, and I specifically want to talk to you about some British diarrhea from a long, long time ago. In 1854, you may know of this story. There was an epidemic in London, in Soho. People were dying all over the place. They couldn't figure what out. All the doctors in Harley Street, it must be the smell. We're not going down there. We're just going to write our reports. It's got to be a smell. Just let those people die. They're in the kind of ghetto anyway. Along came a guy called Jon Snow, not from Game of Thrones. If you're a House Winterfell fan, forget that. You're showing your age there. No, Jon Snow was a physician, and along with the pastor there, started making what he called a ghost map. And all he did was he took a map of London and he started marking down here in the bottom left where people were dying. Where did they live when they died? He didn't examine them particularly, he just did this map. And what he found was there was a concentration of people dying in a particular area of London. He didn't use big data, he didn't use predictive analytics, he didn't use machine learning. What he did was he used a small amount of data, he made a big impact, and what he figured here with this data collection, aggregation, analysis was what was wrong. There was cholera in the water system. And so he literally took the handle off the water pump and immediately people stopped dying. So to me, that was a great example back nearly 165 years ago of people using data and, if you like, information technology or information to try and solve questions and challenges around medicine. Now, he didn't need any of these guys to go do that. I think today we've gotten lulled into a false sense of security that we have to have the biggest system out there and spend a lot of money in order for anything to happen in terms of IT. But I want to give you a little bit of a history lesson if I can start this with kind of the evolution of technology and how it may inform us of what's going to happen in the future. So back about 1975, the Apple I was with a slew of kind of homebrew computers that came out. It was the first kind of home-based PC that people were able to use for themselves. Some of you may be nodding and may remember that device coming out. I certainly can remember the Commodore PET that came out about the same time. And then nothing much really got going until Windows 95. And some of you may remember that. I was in Boston at the time. I remember the day it came out. That was about a 20-year time span. And then kind of home personal computing really kind of entered a new age and people were more productive. Now, Those of you who've used those systems know they weren't the greatest. We had the blue screen of death. We had ugly interfaces. We had the internet that took forever with a dial-up modem that made lots of beeps. It was good, but it wasn't great. It wasn't for another 15 years that the iPhone and the iPad came along and fundamentally changed the input device that we use today. So the key thing there is not that you thought these technologies were good or bad. It's the time span between a meaningful change in the technology, 20 to 15 years. So if we look at what's happened in healthcare IT systems and really the input systems, the systems we use to collect data, most hospitals in 1980s, 1990s were doing homebrew systems they built themselves. In fact, some of the hospitals today are still using those homegrown EMRs, but many people in the big academic medical centers built their own systems here. It wasn't until the 1990s, the 2000s, maybe a little later, people started adopting these well-known systems that you heard today. Interestingly, they all started in the 1970s. So what it tells you is Epic, Meditech, Allscripts all started in the 70s and 80s. It took them 20 years to even write the code to get us an EMR, but we were adopting them all around the 2000 time frame. That's again a 20-year gap from going from the homebrew EMRs, the first generation, to the second generation. It is highly likely that it's going to be at least another 10 to 15 years before something meaningful happens in that space. So what we're talking about when we're talking about different EMRs and those brands there is just a different form of car, a Chevy, a Toyota, whatever you may think it is. It's just a different way of doing the same thing, and they're all fundamentally doing the same thing. So we're given this kind of maybe not so rosy outlook, as I think you've got at least 10 years before the EMR is going to fundamentally change. Vinay, tell us a little bit about what we've done here at PCH.
So David, this is what our journey, our healthcare IT journey at Phoenix Children's looked like. We already had an EMR as early as 2002. It was called Eclipsis. That's the same company as Allscripts. And around 2006, we tried, this was before I joined, actually, we failed a house-wide CPOE implementation. I think that was good because that job opened up, which I took the job, so that was 2006. And then 2009 was a successful hospital-wide CPOE. And then you can see over the next 8 or 9 years, we implemented many new systems. We upgraded many systems. Finally, from 2014 to 2017, we did the ambulatory EMR over there. And while that was happening, this is what was happening over the rest of the country. You are familiar with the February 2009, the ARRA High-Tech Act, which poured in billions of dollars. And you can see the EMR adoption almost went tenfold from about 9.4% to about 83%. We know that money cannot buy happiness. It surely bought a lot of EMRs over there. And it really changed the field completely with various vendors coming in the field and even small rural hospitals reaching the top of the curve. Going back to the 2009 CPOE implementation, and suddenly we had data. We had 70,000 orders placed in 3 weeks. We were placing about 800 pharmacy orders each day. And then with that data, we could now get an insight that was not possible. These are the high-risk drugs, the acronym PINCH, the potassium insulin narcotics, chemotherapy, and heparin. And you can see with granularity, we could see where these drugs were ordered, who was ordering them, what dose they were ordered, and it gave us a new insight into patient safety. So our CPOE Go Live, David, was on Cinco de Mayo. So it was not just celebrating successful implementation, but looking deeper and seeing how are the EMRs functioning. And in those days, there was not robust pediatric dose range checking. These were all adult systems that got passed on to us. So here you see a 1.8 kilo premature infant, and you could order 18 MEQs of potassium chloride, 10 times the dose, near lethal dose. We realized this, and it was clunky and difficult to take those 1,100 drugs and customize them with soft and hard limits across the board. We took a different approach. CPOE was in place. We analyzed over 1 million orders. We looked at what our most common orders were. And then, for example, this is one particular drug. You can see fentanyl. And this is the histogram of the dosing pattern. This is where the typical usual normal dose lies, between 1 to 3 micrograms per kilogram. If you move to a higher dose, this is where you start getting nervous. So this is approximately where your soft stop would be. And then if you go still higher, this is where the doses could be near lethal. So we use both pharmacological approach as well as a mathematical approach to draw those things where your soft stop should be, where your hard stop should be. And if you draw it too close to the normal, you'll get a lot of false alerts, right? And if you move it very far away, there will be no safety net. So with that, complex underlying algorithm, what happens when, so you don't have to look at the algorithm, but that algorithm helped us apply it to all drugs. And we were planning to do about 75 high-risk drugs in the beginning, and we were able to do with a single programming code almost 600 drugs within 4 months. So we applied it at that time, and this is what you see in the first 4 months. Again, the same lethal, dangerous potassium chloride drug, and these were the doses that were ordered and that triggered a hard stop. And you can see the doses over here, 3, 2, 2, 5 MEQs per kilo per dose. And in response to the hard stop, the physicians and the providers reduced the dose from 40 to 15, from 20 to 4, and you can see the percentage of reduction in the dose. This system has been operating for the last 7 years. We went live on Valentine's Day 2011, and we have not had hardly a handful of any real prescribing errors. Now, there have been medication errors at the compounding stage, at the administration stage. And we were recognized with this particular award of the Solutions for Patient Safety as having one of the best drug safety records amongst the group of hospitals participating there. Well, your EMR is not just ordering stuff and entering your documentation. A majority of your time is spent in reviewing this. And this was, at that time, the state-of-art document scanning system. We were not live on the ambulatory EMR, and we wanted to get away from those paper charts so you could access this. This system was so difficult and clunky to use that if you remember, Bruce Morgenstein coined the term chart mess or chart min. It wasn't chart max at all. So, but it had all the data, it had all the documents. So we did not recreate the system. We just created a wrapper, an iPhone kind of skin around it, and we called it Smart Chart. And you know Smart Chart. Very easy to use, very intuitive. You could see the classification of documents. You could divide by inpatient or outpatient. You could see the alerts. You could quickly search for partial word searches like operative reports or this summary. And out of 2,000 documents, you would get 4 documents. So this spread really quickly, and this is the usage statistics. It gets access 1,000 times every single day. 2.5 million patient charts accessed every year. One of the physicians, before she retired, she said that the last 3 years of my stay at Phoenix Children's was pleasant because of Smart Chart. So I do not know whether it's that true, but it was kind of nice to have that validation. And even today, it is one of the most widely used ones to access. It's accessed by physicians, coders. This is another example. The Allscripts system is an open platform. You know, before iPhone came, we did not use the words apps. Every vendor has a growth chart in it, but we were able to go to a third-party vendor and bring in the state-of-the-art, the best possible growth chart. You know, it does the mid-parental height, it predicts the growth, it does the growth velocity, you can add a point, it does almost every single disease entity like Down syndrome growth charts and achondroplasia growth charts. So David, while all this was going on in the EMR world, I'm sure there was a lot happening in IT, the non-EMR world.
So healthcare IT, I think sometimes we think about that as an EMR and our laptops and printers. In fact, there's a whole lot of other IT going on in the hospital. Every department here in the hospital uses technology in their area and is dependent on it. And so my job is not just to kind of keep the EMR running and focus on the EMR every day, although we do spend a lot of time on that. It's to do some other things as well. And one of the big growth areas we've seen is research computing. So, and a lot of times with our researchers, they don't want to be held back and not be able to install anything. They don't want firewalls. They want Linux and they want Unix. They want to be able to run it at whatever speed they like. They want huge data sets. And so we've built in our data center, if you like, a huge private Amazon cloud for our researchers to use with effectively unlimited processing. You can install any kind of operating system you like. You can install any kind of software you want. There's no restrictions whatsoever, and the data is all there for you, and it's also HIPAA compliant. So we're not trying to, solve cure cancer or unpack a genome on an Apple MacBook, which, while it may be fun, is a particularly slow device for doing that kind of research. So we have a lot of computing power, and that's one of the things we've been working on in the last 3 or 4 years. So if you're doing research, this is available free of charge for you to use, and you can spin up any kind of environment you like. Now, the other thing we've been working on is things that really face the patient. When I got here, we just built a brand new hospital, state of the art, and yet what we'd stuck in the room was just a TV running some kind of cable channels. Most kids aren't interested in watching Judge Judy or whatever the daytime soaps are. Those things are kind of moved on a little bit. I was kind of shocked that we put that in there. I also saw the way we were educating most kids was rolling in the VCR. Maybe we'd upgrade it to a DVD, but there was only one on the unit, and as soon as you'd watched it, you had to roll it on to the next person, because God forbid you want to watch it more than one time. So we felt like there was a better way of doing it. And so what we ended up doing, and you may have seen this, we put an iPad in every single patient room. Now, we didn't make a system where you have to check it in and check it out. We left it in the room. It's tethered and powered when the kid is admitted to the room. It's re-imaged for the right age and language that's appropriate for them. If the mom decides halfway through, I don't want my kid on an iPad, they tell the nurse, they click one button, the iPad becomes a clock. We have a patent on this technology. This is something we worked really, really hard on, and now we have other children's hospitals who are emulating this and fundamentally pulling out the TV and using this as their education entertainment platform. So we definitely think this is the way forward. But healthcare IT, like I said, is not just about the EMR. There's a lot more things going on here. We have 214 systems at the hospital that I have to keep up 24/7, that if we have a fire in the data center, I have 12 hours to get them back online or really bad things happen. I'm talking about security cameras. There's 600 security cameras running 24/7 around the hospital, recording 30 days of video. I have to keep the cafeteria credit card machines working at all times, because if not, people get grumpy if they can't buy stuff. And a lot of other systems out there, including things like payroll and finance, which they really couldn't care about the EMR at all, but they have to be able to pay bills and cut payroll and all those things that are important to you as well. Thousands of connected things. So we're not talking about laptops anymore. There are phones. Every kind of medical device that's brought in here today has some kind of Wi-Fi connection on it. We have omnicells, those things you get the drugs out of. They're all connected. They're all hack targets for people. So we have to do a lot of time securing those devices. And then finally, about 3,000 people at any particular day who are not employees that I know nothing about. I have no clue why they're here, what device they're using, that want to get on our network and have to be able to get on the network. So we spend a lot of time sweating these kind of details, but it does leave us eventually with a little bit of time for this, which is one of my passions and also Vinay's, which is data. So when I started out about 15 years ago at Arkansas Children's, when I was getting going there in IT, we said we're going to create a data warehouse. And all my colleagues said they're going to create a data warehouse. Well, most of them 5 years later on were still creating the data warehouse because they wanted to get all the data and put it into a perfect data structure that they decided was perfect. And they spent all the time trying to shove square peg in a round hole. It never worked. They never got it done. Then we so we failed on that, spent an awful lot of money. I wouldn't like to tell you how much money all those places spent failing on that. We then had this concept of a data lake. Okay, we can't figure out what the data is. Let's just pour it all into a great big lake of data, and we'll all figure it out and take it out when we want. Well, that was great. We poured it all in, and then people said, okay, well, the heck are you going to do with it? Well, so we kind of coined this term here of data soup. So when I got here to Phoenix Children's, we spent the first 3 months putting all the data we had, about 70 systems, into one big place. And then we turned the heat up a little bit, and we said we can get any data you like, and we started to make some soup. So soup isn't about having each different data system and just getting the reports from it. So this is not about having a surgery system and just running reports out of the surgery system. It's not about a radiology system and just getting the data out of radiology. And it isn't about taking little bits of that data, sending it up to some vendor in the cloud and having them answer one question for you. Because sending all that little bit of data up into the cloud is a horrendous amount of work to get just what they want. Effectively, we're building them a little tiny data warehouse where they'll spend a lot of money and will answer one question, and the second question you come to, they won't know how to answer it. So we try to avoid chopping everything up and just sending it into the cloud. What we did do is this, and Vinay is going to talk about it in a minute, is we took every single data source we had, so all those 214 systems that I talked about before, and we shoved all the data into one place, and we said, okay, let's just go figure out what we can do. So Vinay, tell us a little bit about what we pulled off.
So David, it's a popular party conversation wherever you go, and they say our hospital has hundreds of systems and they are all in silos. So that's not true over here?
Well, people like to say that still. I hear it all the time, but my preface is I know the data is all in one place. What we do with it is up to you.
So it's nice to see that the solutions developed over here just don't remain over here like the iPad. The dose range checking was licensed back to our vendor, and they are using it at other hospitals. It's nice to see that. If Archimedes was here today, he would not use that long lever. He would use the data. And really, if you look at the list on the top, every single one of them, whether it's for quality or safety or population health or accountable care organizations, risk-based payment or value, all of them hinge around having the right data, the clean data, analyzing the data. So let's look at what are we doing with the data at Phoenix Children's Hospital over here. So I'm going to use a couple of examples. This is looking at acute kidney injury from nephrotoxic medications. And we know that out of about 1,100 drugs on a formulary, most hospitals have about 70 to 75 drugs that are nephrotoxic. And AKI develops in about 25% of those patients. Simple interventions, daily serum creatinine, pharmacists looking over this, reduction of the doses, therapeutic drug monitoring, eliminating the drugs as soon as possible, can cause as much as 64% reduction in the AKI. So the interventions are real simple, but simple is not easy. Because if you look at it, we have about 250 patients on a given day. Are we doing their creatinine? Who is calculating the creatinine increase? Are we calculating the percentage and classifying into stage 1, stage 2, stage 3? Who is getting therapeutic drug monitoring? Who has got the 4th nephrotoxic drug? So all that data is right there, but where's Waldo? So it's difficult to get that. And this is, I presented it to the board and they were shocked to know, and this is true because we assume that we can treat everything. So there is really no treatment for renal failure. The kidneys can recover on their own or you can support them. But if they go into renal failure, there's nothing to reverse the kidney. So what you're seeing over here is a schematic. This is a schematic of an intranet report that has been live for about 2 years. And you see the 4 areas, not meant for reading over there, but I'm just going to draw your attention. So this was all patient data, where the patient is, what is the weight. All the blue fonts were related to the creatinine. What's the latest creatinine? What was it 7 days ago? What is the percentage right? What is the Schwartz formula? How is it classified into stage? So I can see 003 patients in stage 3, stage 2, and stage 1. The third one was all nephrotoxic medications, including, and David, that's right, the data we are getting it when they get contrast in the radiology, though the physicians do not order contrast, that contrast is captured and shown. It's not only shown once, it's shown for 3 days because it remains in your tubules for a couple of days. So there's a strike through to that contrast or through your aminoglycosides which remain in the tubules. And finally, these were the drug levels. So this was one-stop shop to get all that information. And here you can see the same things in more details. Pharmacists are looking at these patients. There's a nephrology consult. Somebody's on renal replacement that will appear as an R. So really small areas that give the whole picture of what's happening to this patient. And this was, again, the nephrotoxic drugs, the number of drugs. You can expand them. You can see how many days. You can see what was monitored. And these were the results that we found, that not only the incidence of nephrotoxic use, but this is actual AKI days came down. And this is the percentage of patients who were on nephrotoxic drugs developing AKI. So these are tangible benefits that with IT tools and with data that we were able to pull that back. This is another example. This is brand new. This is 10 days old. And these, the incidence, and you can relate with this, the incidence of chronic patients with complex problems is going up. Multi-specialties, they are seeing 10 specialties, they have 5 ED visits, 12 admissions, 50 ambulatory visits. It's all there in the EMR, but there's your Waldo again. It's all there, but how do you get it? And especially if you're in the ED, in a busy ED, where you have 3 kids with just runny nose and a sprain, and then somebody comes with a history like this, how do you sort that? And that was the ED problem that Karen Yeager and Zeb Timmons were trying to solve. So again, David, because we have all that data, we brought that data together and created a new tab. As I mentioned earlier, this was the ability to add tabs in our EMR. So this was the growth chart tab. This was the smart chart tab. And this is the new insight tab. And in one view, busy looking screen, but let's walk through this. 11-year-old female, 22 kilos, 11 admissions, 3 ED visits, 281 ambulatory visits, really. And you can see all those ambulatory visits, gastro, general pediatrics, endocrinology, and they are color-coded. The endocrinology visit corresponds to the endocrinology physician. So Dorothy, it's your patient over there. You can see this is the patient. There's no identification, but you can see. So you can quickly see the patients. What were their visits? 32 imaging studies, 1,260 tests, every active prescription that is there, acute problems, chronic problems, critically high values, low values, normal values. And there are tabs over there. So this was the results tab. And you can see every of those results, which ones were CBC, which departments were ordering them. Quickly search for a thing like T4, or click on endocrinology, and every single out of those 1,206, 17 endocrine tests are right at your fingertips. This was the imaging studies. I can see 39 images, 14 general radiology, 2 ultrasounds, 1 IR, 12 echo or EKGs, and I can click on any one of them. So we wanted a 30 to 40 second access of being able to quickly access this. Presented this to the Family Advisory Council composed of 10 parents with complex kids just yesterday. And we got applause. They were clapping. Now, we are not creating systems to get applause, but we want them for patient care. And the parents said, we have been waiting for this. We want to hug you. And so these are the things we want to impact in the lives of our patients and our physicians. This has been live for the last 10 days only. Go to the Insight tabs and have a look at it. So David, what's going on with this empty
Yeah, so much
room?
as I'd like, I'm not a great clinician. I can't do those wonderful things with the clinical data, but I do think about some of these business problems. And this right here is a business problem. Everybody's in clinic. You've got all your people here. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and the waiting room's completely empty and you can't do any business. And what you may know here from a financial perspective is no-show rates. We often get a no-show rate of anywhere from 5 to 15 to 20% in most clinics every day. That means people are sitting around doing nothing. You may have that great time to go get your notes done and built in that time, but that's a time when nothing's going on. And people who want to visit are now waiting 3 months at the end of a queue when they could be here today. So we took the approach of, okay, can we predict who's not going to show up for their visits? And this was the era about 3 or 4 years ago when big data and predictive analytics was what everyone talked about. We're like, we can definitely do that. We can get that predictive analytics. We're going to look awesome. We'll predict who's not going to show up, and then we'll overbook them, just like the airlines do, and we'll fill that slot, and everyone will be happy. Well, we did the math. We built the model. It looked absolutely awesome. We figured out with the top 20th percent we could predict with 67% accuracy who wasn't going to show up. We thought, we've got this nailed. It's going to work. We ran a bunch of tests. It was awesome. We get ready to start overbooking the people. We run the thing in test. Absolute epic failure. In just 3 months since we built the model, so many variables changed that we were looking at where people lived, whether it was the winter, the summer, the autumn, whatever it may have been. All those things changed. The model was completely invalidated, didn't work at all, which is one of the actual realities of statistical models. Is they're great on the data, you change them, but then reality happens and things don't work so well. So this didn't work at all, but I didn't want to give up. So I had this idea. Some of you may remember this from the 1990s. I was telling about Windows 95. If I wanted 2 hours off in the middle of the day, I just set my disk drive to defrag, and it sat there all day long. And what defrag does is, on the disk drive, it moves all the empty spaces all the way to the end, and it fills up all of the real data at the start of the disk, kind of compacts that down. And think of that like a schedule. Think of that as that's your clinic schedule. We got lots of little tiny gaps all the way through and then a big chunk in the end. Well, how great would it be if you could defragment your schedule and move everything up and fill in those gaps and then provide more space at the end to get those people who really need to be able to see you. So we came up with a tool that effectively, under the covers, defragments your schedule. It is looking out to say, who's booked 3 weeks from now, and where have I got a gap in the schedule 2 days from now, and can I move that patient forward? Okay, now it has lots of complex algorithms. If they've got radiology or a procedure visit, they can't move that because it's got a multiple appointments booked to it. If they've got an insurance that we don't have the insurance check on yet, we can't move that forward. We've got we don't want to move an OT, PT exam because they're supposed to have it every single week. We don't want to move them all into 1 week and have 4 weeks where they have nothing. But we did all that work, we got all that working, and now we are finding these holes in the schedule. We're figuring out who we can move forward. We text the parent to say, hey, we've got an earlier appointment for you. Would you like it? Well, the parents are normally like, hey, sure, I will. So we text those out to people. The first person who gets the text is the person that showed up the most in the past. So if you have a great record of showing up, we text you first. This has been going on now for 6 months. We filled in about 150 appointments a week using this process. Now, when the person clicks on a button and they see the appointment time, they can pick the appointment they want, and they can say, yes, I want this earlier appointment. It automatically makes the change in the schedule. The scheduler is not doing the work. So the scheduler isn't calling 15 people looking to fill that gap. They're just putting people at the end of the schedule, and the system's doing all the work. The parents love it because they feel like they're jumping the queue. Right? They're making a few steps down the line. We love it because it's filling in our schedule. So this is really not only using data in a new way, but it's kind of interacting with the patient in an automated fashion. Now, another area we look at really heavily is provider communication. This is kind of the old school way, lots of phone calls, doctor calling the nurse, the results are back, they're okay, they're not okay, call the patient, it's okay, it's not okay. Same thing, and maybe we got sophisticated and now we're using texting or we're using a phone call to Vocera, and that's kind of our level of sophistication. Well, that's kind of boring, certainly not what I'm involved in. And so we said, how can we do this a little better? Why should it be the nurse or someone has to remember to contact the physician to tell them to go do something? Or why is it the nurse has to keep checking in the EMR just to figure out if something's happened? Why can't we take all that data we've just been talking about and automate a notification, almost like have a bot that's sending all the messages to people to remind them what's going on? So we put this into action. Here's a very simple example that's been going on with the nurses for quite some time. It's a surgery change. So what happens a lot of times is surgery was booked for 9 o'clock this morning. It gets moved back till 10:30. You guys are really busy. We have to move the surgery back. No one tells the nurse. So the nurse still preps the patient at 9 o'clock, and then people show up at 10:30. They're no longer ready. Or even worse, the schedule goes the other way around. They were at 10:30. It's moved up to 9. They show up to pick the patient. Patient's not ready. So every time we monitor the surgery schedule every minute of the day, every time we see a surgery moving in the same day, we send a Vocera message to the nurse saying, hey, this is what happened. And we already know the nurse that's associated with it. We take it one step further. So the nurses are not so great about documenting pain scores. Okay, we know the patient was given a med that needs a pain score. We know 45 minutes later on that pain score hasn't been documented in the EMR. So we send the nurse a nudge via Vocera saying, hey, we see you gave this patient this medication. Can you document the pain score for us? Right there in the Vocera message, they get to pick what level of pain score is. They press the button, it goes back into the EMR. They don't even have to log into SCM.
So David, they are entering a data in their handheld, which is going back to the EMR, correct?
Right, and they don't even have to remember to do it. They just get a little reminder, and if they've already done it, they can get rid of it, but it's smart enough to know even if they've done it. So what other areas can we do with that? Well, in the clinics, we do little nudges. So the patient often moves from one status to the next in your clinic. They might be in the waiting room, ready for provider, ready to discharge. We can send you an automated text message to you on your cell phone whenever a patient moves into any one of the statuses. So if the patient is put into the room and is ready for provider, we know that you're the person that's scheduled to see that patient. We can send you an automated text message to say, patient's in the room. Several of you using this already. That's available for free. For anybody who wants it, you just email me. So the next level is, okay, well, can we do these nudges in other ways? And so Northwell Hospital in New York has just rolled these two out. So these are physician-related nudges. So basically, there's an MRI barrier on this patient. They're backed up with their MRIs. Can we schedule this patient as an outpatient MRI and then let the patient discharge out of the hospital? This is the computer doing the analytics, checking it behind the scenes, and then prompting. And when you say yes, the scheduling happens automatically. This seems like it might be a help. We've got the next thing about a PT. The same kind of example is that they're backed up. Can we get that eval done today? Reminding people, nudging people, can you do it? So this is where we think we might be able to take all that data that's in the EMR that you spend hours and hours putting in and use it. But Vinay, what I've heard when I go around the country is that many, many providers are unhappy with the EMR. Whatever brand it is, they're pretty frustrated. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I was hoping we could skip that portion.
Oh, sorry to bring it up. I did put it on you, not me. So.
Okay, so this is a typical picture that many of you must have got from your patient. Cute, loving, touching picture from a 7-year-old girl to her physician. Now, what's wrong with that picture? What's wrong with that picture? What's wrong with that picture is the physician has his back turn to the patient. The physician is examining the computer instead of examining the patient. So there's a serious flaw that has happened once the EMR technology came in. So you may have heard reports like this. Doctor is spending more time with the computer, more time on EHR than face-to-face time, stealing from doctors and patients face-to-face interaction. Pajama time, so you're going home and charting, doing your EMR at home. So this was a nice cartoon. Do you know who this guy is? He's a hospitalist from Stanford, ex-hospitalist. Name is Zubin Damania, goes by on YouTube as ZDogMD. Produces a lot of nice educational videos, funny videos, but this was a nice cartoon over here. I don't have to ask you who this is. This is the FBI's most wanted, but do you know what Willie was known for? Now, David, this slide is more relevant than your diarrhea slide.
Okay, all right, I'll let you get away with it.
So when he was arrested, they asked him, Willie, why do you rob banks? Why do you rob banks? And he said, he was surprised. He said, that's where the money is. That's where the money is. So why are we spending so much time in the EMR? That's where the information is. That's where the information is. Your EKG, your allergies, your immunization, your past history. 100 years back or 50 years back, all that information was in a paper chart 20 to 50 years back. 100 years back, that information was only in the patient's body, right? You could talk and you could touch. There was nothing outside that body. But things have changed. It doesn't mean you have to be in the EMR all the time, but that's where the information is. So, taking away the face-to-face contact. EMRs are taking away the face-to-face contact. But so does surgical timeout. That's why it's called a timeout. So does hand washing. Now, fortunately, only 30% of the physicians wash their hands, so we are not wasting that much time. You can still have the face-to-face contact if you don't wash your hands adequately. But getting the 5 rights of a drug takes time. Reviewing literature takes time. Now, I do not know out of the pie chart how much should you spend in eye-to-eye contact, how much you should spend examining the patient, how much you should look at the EMR. But it's not zero. Agreed, they are clunky systems, they are wasteful clicks, and we should reduce that. But you cannot take the fact away that the money is in the EMR, the information is in the EMR. Zubin Damania, ZDogMD again. So let's see what he says. Why your doctor won't look you in the eye. EMR skill. So let's play a small video clip.
Lipozene helps you lose weight, but how?
Lipozene helps you feel full so you can eat less.
Okay guys, have you ever wondered what's changed in medicine that now you go to the doctor and they don't look you in the eye? Instead, they're looking at a computer screen. Their back may be to you. You're sitting there up on that exam table in a paper-thin gown with your butt hanging out, feeling vulnerable, thinking, this person doesn't care about me because they're staring at a computer asking me questions and clicking boxes. What happened to medicine? We went into it, doctors, nurses, everybody who takes care of patients on the front line, to connect with other human beings. And yet now, that seems to be gone. We can't even look at our patients in their most vulnerable moments. The gift they give us is being vulnerable with us, and we're not able to be there for them. Why? The electronic medical record. And I will not call it an EHR, electronic health record, because there is nothing about health in this thing. Patients, you guys need to understand how this has destroyed medicine. It was a great hope that turned out to be false. Let me explain what's going on in that exam room. You come in, the doctor immediately sits down, logs into their computer, and starts clicking. Okay, so have anything changed in your medications? Well, you're thinking, I've already been through this at this clinic and that clinic and this. Why don't they have it in the computer? Because one of the great tragedies of electronic medical records is they never were designed to talk to each other. Why is that? Because hospitals and health systems who spend billions on instituting an electronic health record have zero incentive to have you share that data with other health systems. They want to keep you in their group and make it as hard as possible to share data. So the electronic medical record vendors complied with that. There was no mandate that there was interoperability between these records. So who suffers? You and that doctor who's trying to fill in the blank.
Okay, so let's go back and see where we were. So there's nothing in that record that is health related, and these records don't talk to each other at all. They are islands of automation. They are filling big vendors' pockets, and they are coming between you and...
Okay, guys, have you ever...
So this is, some of you know what an health information exchange is. That's the hub. Most of the states have it. Arizona went through some teething troubles over the last 8 or 9 years, so David and I have been involved in that. But Arizona's health information exchange is called HealthCurrent. And this is a schematic of majority of the patients, millions of lab values, x-rays, Sonora Quest, hospitals, behavioral health centers, community centers, all pushing in data electronically without anybody touching it, going into this hub. Have any of you logged into this system? Anyone over here? No, because it's a second system, but this is the portal, and if you log into the system, your patient visiting any healthcare, majority of the healthcare facilities in Arizona.
92%.
92, that's exact over there. So 92% of the facilities, you'll have this information if you go to a second system. We don't want to go to a second system. So DB Motion belongs to Allscripts. This was a state-of-the-art vendor in Israel. They had the entire country's population in the HIE of this, and it was the state-of-the-art. It is directly integrated with Allscripts, and so you don't have to log into that system. This is a small icon. This will be live in about 2 weeks or so. There are a couple of doctors who are trying it out. Dexa, you have tried this out. And as soon as you are on patient Maria, that small icon sitting inconspicuously over there, you don't even realize what it's doing. It's communicating with the state HIE. Let's look at a few more screens. And over here, you see the key elements as you expanded, the problems, the diagnosis, the medication, the measurements, immunization. And you'll notice some of those are bolded and some of those are not. So even the HIE is smart enough to realize that the information that is going from PCH, you're not really interested because you have that information. So it is showing you the net new information in bolded areas. The next version will even allow you to import allergies and problem lists that were diagnosed somewhere else after you confirm it. So you won't have to re-enter that. And right at the bottom over here, I have clicked over here on a document called Summarization of Episode. Think of this as the mother of all discharge summaries. It's one discharge summary, not 17, that electronically gets updated every time that data comes into the hub. And you can see the care providers from all these places. You can see the advanced directives, you can see the results, you can see the labs, and you can see a host of data, and this should be live. So no systems are ever connected to each other. It wasn't easy. It didn't happen on day one, but this is happened, and it should happen at PCH within about 2 to 3 weeks. Went to medicine to take care of patients and not click boxes, right? That's another thing that we typically hear. Check boxes after check boxes and clicks after clicks. So let's see what's happening over here. This is a sample template from our rheumatology colleagues who are sitting over here. And you can see the plethora of check boxes there that they have for juvenile idiopathic arthritis patients. And Dr. Shishav has clicked about 6 or 7 check boxes, but the system is still telling him you are missing systemic GI features. It's still not happy. It's checkbox hungry. But I would argue that these 3 folks over here are not data entry clerks. They're sitting out over there, and they are showing an example of excellence in documentation. This is not just checkbox, filling a checkbox for the sake of checkbox. And let's look at what happens when they enter those checkboxes. A lot of my slides, as you could tell, were from Google Images. This one is not. It is not a PowerPoint slide, it's real. Well, actually, it is a PowerPoint slide, but it is real. These are real patients powered solely by the clicks in the EMR by these providers, that you can hold this in front of your patient and you say that Johnny had 2 active joints at the last visit. The doctor's score was 2. The parent score was 7. The total score was 7. The color-coded scores over here are showing you the disease activity. Every visit where the joints were inflamed is red in color. Every visit where the joints were not inflamed is green in color. What treatment is going on, what's happening with the labs, what's going on with the morning stiffness and uveitis is right there. Physicians are using this in real time, showing it to patients. And not only that, it also powers the population health, and they can measure what percentage of their patients are in inactive disease, clinically inactive disease. So again, powered purely by human clicks. What about pajama time? I think Dr. Kalio is probably going home at 10 o'clock at night with an Uber ride with all this documentation, or a complex looking slide, but let's look at those green donuts. What you're seeing on the top is nearly more than 500,000 documents across every single division at PCH. And the bottom half is you're seeing only for rheumatology, so only for rheumatology. And what those donuts are, the donuts are measuring the burden of documentation. What percentage of your charts you're completing after 5 p.m. on the date of service, after 5 p.m. a couple of days after service, Saturday, Sunday, 48 hours, 72 hours, 96 hours. So the red color is kind of measuring the documentation burden. Here you have our rheumatology colleagues doing 12,000 charts, and they are doing about 87% of their documentation by 5 p.m. So forget pajama time. I think they are rushing to happy hours every single day. Right? And Saturday, Sunday, I should give them more calls. They are not, And 99% of the documentation completed within 24 hours. Gosh, improving quality and efficiency. Maybe we need to make a video of that. Well, I'm not divulging all the details. This is another complex looking dashboard. This is live. This is used daily. These are safety rounds powered solely by nursing clicks. What is my central lines? What is my Foley catheter? Which IV is infiltrated? Who's on a ventilator? Who's on AKI? Who's at risk for fall? Again, solely powered by information that comes from the child. So David, we have talked a lot about what's going on, what we have been doing, where we came from. So I'm hearing a lot of things about machine learning, and they're going to take over physicians. So do you have something to give us a peek into the future?
Yeah, maybe a little bit of a crystal ball here to try and figure out what's going on. And I've been in a lot of talks recently talking about disruptive healthcare. What's going to happen in healthcare in the next 15, 20 years, the Amazon, Walmart kind of model. And the example that comes up all the time is the airline industry, but also think about the Uber industry as well, the taxi driver industry, if you want a good example of what everyone thinks is going to happen. Flying a plane hasn't changed. We've been flying on planes, almost exactly the same planes for 20, 30 years. The process is almost exactly the same. We take off, we land, we get from one place to the next. What's improved drastically in plane flying is the safety record. Okay, massively better over time with lots and lots of focus on safety. Very similar to what we're doing. What has fundamentally been disrupted and fundamentally changed in the airline industry is the way that we consumers make a selection and book our tickets. The service brokering, if you like, how we connect, how we find how we want to fly. And I would say nearly all of us today has access to enough information that we find the cheapest and the most convenient flight, because we've decided that flying is fundamentally the same whichever airline you go on, because the safety record is high. And we may have our preferences, we may get air miles, we may be tricked into being sticky to one airline, but fundamentally at the end of the day, what's changed and what's been disrupted in this industry is the brokering of the consumers to the service. And so what everybody thinks is going to happen in healthcare is the actual act of taking care of the patient won't fundamentally change. Our safety record will continue to get better. We've got to get better. We'll be differentiated on our safety record, just like the airline industries. The massive disruption is going to be in the way that consumers select where they're going to get their health care, because coming very quickly are apps and services from big companies like Amazon and Walmart who all their goal in life is they don't want to be the doctor, they don't want to be the pharmacy, they want to be the person you go to as a consumer in order to make the selection. That's what Amazon's game is all about, is you always go to Amazon for everything you want. And so what is already starting to happen is Amazon or the big insurance companies are saying, You can pay $1,000 out of pocket and go to this place locally here, or we'll fly you and your wife to the Cayman Islands. You can have the surgeries completely on us, and by the way, the quality is 5 times better, documented, and they're JCO accredited. Okay, and if you want to read about that, that's Nararian Health. They're out of India beginning now, but they're all over the world. And this kind of selection choice of being able to see very transparently how much it costs. Remember on Uber, your driver rating that you all take a look at when you decide whether you want this guy? These things are coming. I'm convinced of it, and everybody else is convinced of it. This is what's going to change. Okay? It will drive changes in this area right here, but the fundamentals of flying a plane is exactly the same. You can take this exact model and think about taxi rides. The exact same thing happens. This is where we think the disruption is going to happen. So focusing on which brand of EMR we've got and worrying about that and spending millions of dollars and lots of effort to change that out may be the wrong place to be looking if we're really trying to make sure our future is solid here as providers. Now we all, or you all, work in a very specialized area. You may be thinking, it's not going to happen to us. We're the only people. Or what if I can get on a free plane ride to somewhere else in the country or somewhere else in the world and go to Great Ormond Street or whatever it may be and get a lower priced, higher quality thing? We're not just competing locally anymore, we're competing across the world. So let's talk a couple of slides here at the very end about AI. You may have heard about it. This prediction's been out there that in the next 4 to 5 years, radiologists will be completely irrelevant. Sorry, Dr. Miller. And you've all heard about this. Image processing is definitely the way that all artificial intelligence is focusing right now, looking at images and trying to figure it out. But I would tell you, Binet, AI can't even do this today. Can't figure out that dog from that
dog
muffin.
and a muffin?
I think so. Didn't you take a look at that muffin before? So, but
Can
what do I mean?
This? You can
Look at this. Okay. Can you find the muffin from the dog here?
So
Okay.
how many of you had the muffin over
Yeah,
this
you might be
morning?
needing a dog. So AI can't figure this out at all. Okay, it doesn't know the difference. Let's do one more for fun. So mops and dogs can't figure that out as well. So I sense, Vinay, that really this is not going to go anywhere, and it's just a bunch of, hype and getting me to spend more money.
I don't know about that, but let me see if I have an example over here. Now, is JAMA a good journal? I've not been doing clinical care
Okay.
for quite some time. I think it's a good one, right? So this is not from an evening tabloid or from People's Magazine. This is a JAMA article. The 2 top authors over there, one is an ophthalmologist, and second is a PhD people. Where are the addresses from? Both those addresses from Mountain View, California, Google. This is the article. This is a 15-year study, thousands of patients, and the images taken by the camera. The deep learning model learned from expert ophthalmologists who graded diabetic retinopathy from none to a scale of 5, none, mild, moderate, severe, and proliferating. And after learning millions of images, the computer logic is recognizing diabetic retinopathy with a sensitivity of 96% and a specificity of 93%. Results validated by 7 US board certified ophthalmologists. So on one hand, you have the muffin and the dog, and on the other hand, you have this. And what I suggest is, don't get carried away with the pendulum in either one direction. Complete disbelief or total buy-in. See where we are going. I may have presented a somewhat of a rosy and optimistic picture, and that's because of the enthusiasm and energy. But there is some truth in that, and evaluate for yourself what is hype, what is media hype, and what is truth. The tool is there. It's the right tool. The stethoscope took 100 years to go from its wooden, inflexible, rigid thing till they could extract the rubber from trees in Malaysia and make those flexible things over here. It took 100 years. I don't think it will take 100 years for now, but this is the right direction that we are going. So when the ophthalmologist no longer makes eye contact, when the eye doctor doesn't make eye contact, that's a real, but that's what Google is looking at your diabetic retinopathy over there. And I'm going to finally leave with this. We started with diarrhea in 1854 with John Snow. Around the same time, Darwin came up with his Origin of Species, and it really sums up everything. It is, the folks who are most adaptable to change are the ones who are going to survive. So we are seeing a lot of change. Be adaptable, go with the flow, resist where things are not right, and make up your own mind. So I'm going to stop at this stage and leave it open to questions.
Yep.
From the data for the ratios,
Yep.
how are you capturing that ratio data specific to radiology?
Yeah, very easy. So basically we know at the end of the day all the appointments. So at the start of the day we know all the appointments that were made, and at the end of the day we know all those appointments were either had a patient showed up, we documented that we were there, or that they weren't there at all. So that's data that we've had for a really long time. We can break it down by provider, by appointment type, and you can imagine it varies by location. It also varies by time of the year, so when school's in and school's out, those things are predictive models, where the people are driving from, the mode of transport, but all that data is available. So you definitely get it for radiology. Yep.
And yeah, yes, I mean, I deliberately left out natural language processing, and you'll hear that in meetings, and we've been hearing about that for the last 10 years, that it will pick up all the data. There is ability, we have a search engine, right, David, where we can really go through that and search for keywords if you're doing it for research. It's not as easy and rapid and real time to give it back to the patient. So this is what I would suggest. We do not want 1,000 check boxes on your thing. But look at your patient, look at your 22Q minus patients, and look what are the critical things that you want to track, and those are the things should be structured, and the rest you can describe in a narrative. So have a balance. We can extract some. David, any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, we can get some value out of text, but it's never going to be as categorical as checkboxes or drop-down definitive results. We can also spend a whole lot of time and effort trying to get that value out of a narrative, when maybe it would be easier just to drive forward and go it off a structured note. But I think there's always going to be a place for the part of the story that you need to tell about the patient. There's always going to be a part for that. But having the entire note be one big text box, that may not be appropriate for every single discipline.
Go ahead, sorry.
One thing I was going to say about this is I don't think that they or server we could do the things we've done in the past. Control all of their software on the
Yep.
administrative side of the
Yeah, so one of the great, Medic's got a lot of positives. One of the negatives that many, many people talk about, and Stanford and everyone else, is you can only get the data about 14 hours after it was entered. So there is no real-time nature whatsoever of the data. So the dashboards that Vinay showed are just not technically possible. Now, a lot of things are better. Like you said, it's kind of a plus-minus thing. But the data is controlled by Epic as it is by Cerner. You don't have any access to it unless it's delayed. And so you can get a delayed copy of it. Yeah.
You also can't write programs that
Yep.
build up that.
Exactly. So you get what Epic wants. So the great example is you don't have to do it yourself, but you can't do it yourself. So there's a double-edged sword for that. So we can do it ourselves, but sometimes we do have to do it ourselves. Epic, you get what they tell you, or Cerner, you get what you tell you. They may have more programmers working on a pediatric version of things, but you can't do these innovative areas where we're really pushing the envelope. You're just a little bit few years delayed while everybody gets on board. So yes, the tab that's in there, we believe we're the first place in the country doing Power BI in the EMR in context of the patient versus you having to log in to something else. And that's only available because we actually made that change ourselves. We didn't have to wait for permission to do it.
So Dan, thank you so much for asking the rehearsed question that David and you had agreed upon last night. So.
Yes, Doug.
Where are we here with using, say, like big data, wearable tech, things like that, where patients come in and might have their steps already recorded, the blood sugars might be on their phone, blood pressure, things like that, where they can download to them?
Yeah, so the patients have a portal called Follow My Health. It's not tied to Allscripts and it's not tied to PCH. It's kind of a portal that lots and lots of providers in the Valley submit data. And one in that portal are able to submit, they're connected to Fitbit and their own information. And so they can choose to share that with you at any time. So there's a lot of rich functionality. That is not like a PC-based portal. That is a phone-based app. You can do prescription refills. You can talk backwards and forwards with the physician. All those things you can do in kind of the Epic MyChart perspective. The downside to all of that is we have very low adoption, as everybody does around the country. So what you may not know about portals is even though we send by law, we have to send out over 70% of our patients to get the invite to join. We have less than a 5% adoption rate, and those are typically the very chronic kids. And what we've done in many cases is to overcome that, because a lot of times people say, okay, we've got to get information out to the patient, so we want to get information back. Oh, just use the portal. Well, yes, it's great technology, but if no one's using it, it's kind of pointless. So normal lab results are a great example of something is we couldn't get normal lab results to the portal. They've been going out for 4 years. Patients could look at them. No one was looking at them. They were all calling in. So we text out those results only of the normal because we know texting has a higher penetration rate. Nearly 60% of the texts we sent get read and get acted on, whereas in the portal it's a lot less. So yes, it sucks in all that Fitbit information, but so far we've had less adoption of the portal. And the number one thing, and I'm kind of answering a long-winded answer to your question, is we know for portal adoption, this is across the country. It doesn't matter what technology. If the doctor or the nurse during the visit says, have you seen our portal? This is where I'm going to be sending you results, or this is how you can contact me with a question, adoption goes through the roof. If when the patient says, I heard at the front desk you have a portal, and the physician or the nurse says, I don't know what you're talking about, we don't have a portal, imagine what happens, right? So that is the number one thing that drives adoption. If you find value in it, they'll find value in it. So yes, that is in there already.
David, I underplayed that. If you go to geeky healthcare IT meetings, that's all they're talking about. And we all know the social determinants of health. The encounters that you and I have affect only 10% of what happens. And then they talk about the zip code and the pollen count and the Fitbit and the sleep study and the breath analysis. And so the way we approach it is, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We didn't have this data. There's a ton of data. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit. Let's address that first. So when you talk about Fitbit and glucose monitors, we'll get to the glucose monitors first before we get to the Fitbit, right? So all these things sound really exciting, really interesting. We are watching them. It's a small portfolio of attention. We are not ignoring them, but we realize there's lots that you can do with what you have that we did not have that is affecting major quality and safety issues. And that's the reason we are not making that. It sounds good. It sounds glamorous and sexy, and it makes good slides, but that's the reason.
Thank you guys very much.